Okay, folks. So we were having some technical issues. Not sure Eric dropped out there for a minute, but we were talking about how, Camille, you'd brought up about how he was not necessarily starstruck by Prince, and then you were going to mention Paul Peterson, who he was in the band with, and Family, fDeluxe, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you were going to say something about Paul.
Well, I just know that that when a lot of celebrities or singers or musicians or people that are doing something great in the world, right? When they see fans, do you ever get scared? That was what I was going to ask, and or worried that someone's just going to go crazy and just because of their excitement and give them a great big hug, because you see all this stuff.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, I remember footage of fans jumping on stage, and but it's crazy. I think like you said, we were talking about how Prince probably liked that about Eric, and probably trusted him that way, because he didn't want fans around. He wanted people that were serious. Yeah, and that's the same thing about Elisa. Said the same thing that you kind of said, and she's like, he didn't really have any friends,
No.
or people he could trust.
No.
And it was really weird, because she was saying that she thinks that's why they got along so well together, and that they could talk about things and work so well together in the studio when she first started off with him a long time ago in Paisley with Chrysler's Records. So it's kind of like putting all these pieces together, and that was one thing that was interesting, that it's like these little tests he's giving you. Oh, if you're a fan of my music, I don't want you around. Or but it's crazy, because the song, and I tell Marty all the time. We went to the Dakota, and on the 7th,
7th of October, right? You went to see the St. Paul All Stars?
Oh no, on the 1st. Sorry, on the 1st of October, and we saw the St. Paul Peterson Minneapolis Funk All Stars. And you've seen them so many times that it's just like, it's whatever. But I told Marty the same thing, and I can understand where Eric is like, yeah, I'm not a fan. I like some of his songs, or but I've been playing that for years, and I tell Marty all the time, I'm like, doesn't it get old hearing the same songs over and over again? And she goes, no, Camille, which I think is funny. But but it's things like that when people can start getting cues that someone's not a fan, but they can just talk to somebody and be like, like I say to her all the time, doesn't it get old? Doesn't Morris Day get old? No, I love Morris Day. And I go, oh, because it's just funny to me.
Yeah. No, the relationships and stuff like that. Sometimes I think if you're in it, I believe we have him back.
Uh-oh.
No, he's fine. And ladies and gentlemen, he's connecting to our audio. And he's getting a check mark.
Okay.
Eric is back.
Yeah. My modem went down. I've got internet through Xfinity Comcast, and I lost the internet connection. Fortunately, I still have I still get all internet service also through CenturyLink. So I had to shift over. Something's wrong with it. Anyway, the Comcast internet is down. So I've got it back up on my other.
I paused for a little bit, and then we went and had a discussion about people approaching you and the various levels of fame and what have you. How do you approach a fan who knows who you are and gets really overzealous and wants to give you a big fat bear hug and stuff like that?
Exactly.
Fortunately, there aren't that many situations like that.
Right. Good.
and I think there might be something about just who I am and how I, whatever vibe I give off that maybe people don't I don't know. It's funny. I have to discern between, people who are interested in the music,
Yeah.
Versus, the problem with fandom is the inability or the determination of people to not distinguish between the value of the product
Yeah.
and the person.
Yeah.
You know, because most of the people who are aware of who I am know me through the Prince connection.
Sure.
Then those people that come up to me and said, "You're the greatest saxophone player in the world."
And I've never heard of you, never seen you before, but you sound great.
Well, I will always thank them for that. But occasionally, if I'm in the mood, I'll say, "Well," or "You're my favorite saxophone player in all the world." And sometimes I'll say, "Thank you very much. I appreciate that." Somebody asks you something, "Who's your second favorite?" And it's like, because basically a lot of people that know a saxophone player, they know is me because that happens to be the music that they love.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'll give you, and I understand that people come up and want to ask me about specific gigs or whatever, things like that I have no recollection of at all, because it was just one gig on a given night or whatever. I'll give you a funny thing about that. You're talking about my growing up around James Brown, and the fact that James Brown was my Prince.
Yep.
And the fact that, aside from that, my brother Alan has made a career out of his association with the books that he's written, and the fact that Alan is basically known internationally as the primary archivist for the entire career of James Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the music, all of the James Brown music that is still released on, through Universal Music, Alan is the co-producer of all of those releases, writes all the liner notes, provides all the personnel and discographical information for all that stuff. He's involved right now as a producer for a James Brown series of specials that's going to be aired, I think, next year on A&E.
Right, four-parter, isn't it? Yeah.
And other things. So anyway, so there isn't anything about the career of James Brown that we don't know, including all of the minutia that all fans know, about things like that. So here's a funny story about that. When Maceo was playing with Prince in the early 2000s, and in 2002, I ended up doing a handful of gigs with Prince at that time, including several in Japan, where I was playing with Maceo and Greg Boyer, trombone player, the three of us. Those are some of the most enjoyable gigs I ever did with Prince, mainly because it was just me and Maceo playing together and hanging out. I mean, I had known Maceo since I was a kid. So anyway, I was asking about Maceo, about his time we were talking about Maceo joined James Brown's band in 1964 and was with James for about a year. And then in summer of 65, Maceo went into the Army. And he was in the services for, drafted. He was in the services for until April, May of 1967. When he got out of the service, he went right back to James Brown's band. And the first recording session that Maceo did with James after he came back was Cold Sweat.
Man.
So anyway, we were just talking about that, and I said, "Yeah, that's funny, Bass. You come back from the service, you're right back in the fire with James, and the first freaking song, session yields Cold Sweat, which was like the groundbreaker, And I said that was a hell of a year, 1967. And Maceo looked at me and said, "No, Eric, you're wrong. I got out of the service in 1968. And I had to look at Maceo and said, "Maceo, no. It was 1967. Said, you went into the service in summer of 65. You got out of spring of 1967. Said, Cold Sweat was released on June 25th, 1960. I mean, I had,
You knew all the facts, figures, and information.
And Maceo's looking at me and said, Eric. And he's starting to get a little aggravated. He said, Eric, how are you going to tell me about, and I said, Maceo, I know this sounds funny, but you got out of the service in 67. It wasn't 68. And I had to sit there and convince Maceo Parker what year he got out of the service, because he said it was 1960. He said, no, Maceo, it wasn't. And I went back and I named for him every song that James Brown had released starting then in order. Yep. It said Cold Sweat came out in June. And then the next song I said was Get It Together, came out in October. And I said, you played this on that, this and that. And finally, Maceo just sat there and he was just shrugging and said, all right, I guess you know my life better than I do.
Why do you think he didn't?
Because Maceo was on the road with James Brown for years and years, playing 300 gigs a year.
Oh.
And they all just meld in. And after a while, yeah, people can come and ask me questions about tours that I did with Prince in the 80s. Yep. And I might conflate. I said, well, maybe that was the year was that 87 or was that 88? I don't know.
See, we talked about this last time when I had Eric on, Camille, and for him, he's the Maceo Parker figure in that scenario. Yeah. You know, because I said to him, you know, look, let me ask, what did you, and I was a little smart aleck. I said, so what did you have for breakfast on September 30th, 1988, when the Love Sex tour, when I first saw you? It was like probably the same thing you had every single time, bacon and eggs, right? Something like that, right?
Whatever, yeah. So now, I actually, you know, I kept pretty accurate records of all of the recording sessions.
He's got journals upon journals of every damn thing he recorded for Prince and
so
and all
but I can get things mixed up.
Sure.
And then I'll go back to one of my journals. I said, oh,
that's why you wrote it
one
down.
I had that one all wrong. I thought that was in, but here it is. So
he had you journal or take down notes back then, or you decided to?
No, I did.
Oh, he did. Okay.
I did for my recording sessions, basically because I wanted to have all of the information to be sure that the contracts were accurate.
And so he got paid.
I'm getting paid. You know,
Eric wants his receipts, baby. He wants his receipts. He wants them now.
And well, plus sometimes, you know, because it was the engineer's responsibility to keep the times for the sessions, and they would, but I would keep them too, and I would just said, okay, let me get this straight. This is what we were, and I put that in my journal, and if you know, and that's what would be filed with the union. So, you know, it was just watching my back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much stuff goes on when you're recording in the studio, and I know that Elisa Fiorello was saying something how they would be sitting in a circle, whatever, with all the band members. And she said that he would tell us to all take notes because he even lost track. He would be changing stuff in the songs, and you know, and he would get a little uppity, when
a little uppity.
Yeah, well,
that's putting it politely.
He would be like, no, I actually want you to do this, and Elisa's like, excuse me. No, you actually said this because you told us to write it down here. See, and everybody's like, "You tell him because he's not going to get mad at you."
She's the fiery Italian American girl from Philadelphia. She didn't give a shit.
Oh, right.
No,
yeah. Well, I mean, when I first joined the band in '86, when he expanded the Revolution, and he required everybody to have a tape recorder. I mean, it was like, you have to bring in a cassette recorder to record the rehearsals because he doesn't want to have to, he wants to be sure that everyone. Now, the thing was, now that changed years later from when I was 7 years later, when digital technology came out, he changed the whole thing. And after a while, he would not permit anybody to have a tape device of any kind. So by then, that's why he's probably telling people to take notes. I used to record some of the rehearsals, but myself and Matt Bliston, the trumpet player, my buddy who was the trumpet player with me, we were the only ones in the band that knew how to read and write music. So most of the stuff that we would play, we're writing it down, music paper. I mean, I've got a stack of all my music notes from all of the rehearsals and sessions.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we had that down, and a prince, you know, the next day would come and say, hey, that isn't, and I would look at Matt and I said, you got it down? And I said, I got it down. I said, Prince, I'm sorry. This is what we played yesterday because we wrote it down.
You said that?
Yeah, if need be, you know. if he wants to get mad at me for something that I've actually done right,
that he told you to do from the beginning.
Yeah, and I would just say, so Prince, excuse me, we will play it any way you want to, but this is how we were playing it. So if you want us to change it, fine.
Yeah.
However you want, but this is what we had.
But because you wrote it down and minded your P's and Q's, he respected that.
We had to document it, and he was respectful of that.
Well, I'm going to be doing sound in running sound in Paisley Park in December 7th for Marty Bragg, and Jellybean and Ty and Dale, just a group of people. But Jellybean's on a track for, what is it, her son or something?
Her late son, Regal the Rare. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, that. But the point is, I went in there. And, I've been there maybe 5 times, and, you've seen it, been there, done it, whatever, So I go in and I talk to the sound guy, and we're talking whatever stories. And then he's telling me, watch what you say around here. And I go, why? And he goes, I tell everybody that. And I go, well, why? And he's like, well, the whole place is tapped. And I go, what? And he's like, yeah, and it's still running. And I go, what are you talking about? And he was basically, after the whole thing, he was like, well, Prince had cameras and microphones in every room because he had that creative process, that he had so much going on, different rooms, people talking about different conversations about music and mixolydian notes and all this stuff. And that it was so hard to keep track of, instead of a cassette tape, he would go back to the studio and replay it back, or if he had to, which I think is cool. But now we have that on our cell phones. I mean, we don't have to have, 8-track tapes, or, reel to reel, or, a Walkman. But I just think that's cool how they did it back then, and the way they did it.
I don't remember that when I was there in the 80s. So that might have been the system that he put in later.
Yeah. Well, so. Way off topic. Aren't you supposed to be? Are you doing another album with Paul? Or creating another, or coming up with?
We want to. We're always talking about it. It's just a matter of, we have no timeline. We still have a whole bunch of music from the initial sessions from the album No Words that we have not completed. And we may go revisit some of that and say, see if we can want to finish that. It's a matter of Paul has been very, very busy with a lot of different things that he's involved in. So it's a matter of just finding the time. And since we have to decide whether we want to try to fund it ourselves or do another crowdfund for it. But we want to do that.
So
we want to continue.
What do you mean, like funding your, like to be able to record in the studio, or to market it, or put it on YouTube or iTunes, and everything? Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. So, and you've obviously been at Creation Studio.
Oh, yeah.
So that's, interesting.
I'm
sorry.
Most of what we'll probably do at Paul's house, because he's got his full Pro Tools right now.
Yeah.
In the basement of his house, and that's only 10 minutes from me. So it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's
Cool.
crazy. What kind of music do you think you'll be doing for that album? Same thing.
Same stuff. It's just, whatever works. We progressive instrumental music, whatever, which means 20 different things to 20 different people. So
would you ever consider having vocals put on it, either Paul, or are you just going to keep it as a primarily instrumental?
It's primarily instrumental. I mean, Paul does some vocalizations now. I mean, things like that.
What's the one that's got a little bit of a talk box thing on it? There's one of the tracks.
Yes. Pretty much that. I'm if there was a song that he came up with that had words on it, I don't dismiss it out of hand, but it's not something that I'm
right away thinking about.
Singers, who needs them anyway? Says the guy who sings.
Yeah.
But Eric, so I actually would like to ask you, I listened to the audiobook version of your brother's book. There was a time, and it was very, boy, I learned a lot.
Who was it? there's an audio version?
There is, and I have a little bit of a bone of contention with it because he mispronounces probably one of the more important names in the book.
Who's the narrator?
Okay, it is. Hold on, let me get my internet rectangle out. I'll let you know here in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, maybe 3. There was a time James Brown, the Chitlin Circuit, and me. Here it is on my phone.
Okay.
And the audiobook version is narrated by Peter Burkrot.
Oh, okay.
He's got kind of this voice, you know. Once you get used to his radio, that kind of 80s radio DJ kind of thing that he's going for. Hold on, bringing on our long-awaited special guest here. Is the co-host of the Purple Knights podcast.
I don't know if Alan knows.
Okay,
there's an audio
Peter
version.
Burkrot, and I want you to let your brother know that this guy mispronounces every single time throughout the book. Hey, Chris, welcome. He mispronounces Maceo's name. He calls him Maceo Parker throughout the whole damn thing.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Well, I thought you should know because like I'm listening to it and going, and when Maceo Parker, and I'm like, what, dude? Yeah. I mean, I could have made a drinking game out of it if I wanted to. Every time he mispronounced Maceo's name.
That's crazy. I've never had a conversation with Alan about it, so I wonder if Alan knows.
Okay, please let him know. I know you're going to call him tonight and let him know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Did you know you have an audiobook?
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, the guy in general does a really good job telling the stories about, you know, moving down to Macon, Georgia, and I skipped the timeline and all that, but I do have a couple questions because obviously you being the younger brother, he brings you up a couple of times and there's some interesting stories. One of them, unfortunately, is a tragedy. I want to pause briefly and just welcome Chris Johnson.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, sir.
Welcome.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good.
I'm doing great. Great to meet you, Eric.
Likewise, man. Happy to have you with us.
Yeah, Eric, he is the host of the Purple Knights podcast. It's a wonderful. He's had Susan Rogers on, Dwayne Tudall, who writes a lot of the books, you know, about the recording sessions that you did. I know you know Dwayne because you got the notebooks, and so I'm sure he's picked your brain once or twice. So, Chris, we were just talking about there was a time, the James Brown Chitlin Circuit and Me, I believe is the title.
Yeah.
And a couple questions I have about that. So James's one son, about your age, Teddy. Yeah. Right. There's an unfortunate late in the chapter, about chapter 24. There's a chapter about how Teddy came to visit. At this point, Alan, your brother, was independently working with James, but wasn't on the payroll anymore.
Right. Yeah. He was actually working for King Records, started King Records at that point, but he was still, you know, doing stuff with James, promoting shows and doing other stuff now and then. Yeah.
Now, Teddy had invited you to go up to Quebec or go up to Canada.
Yeah. Alan and I, we was when we were still living in Pittsburgh. It was summer of '73. And Alan and I were in New York. Basically came into New York for a week to go to the Newport Jazz Festival, the New York Newport Jazz Festival was in New York during those years. So we were in New York to go to all the jazz festival gigs. Yeah. And but when we got in there into New York, we were hanging out one afternoon at James Brown's offices in New York. Charles Bobbitt, who was the famous manager of James for a while, Buddy Nolan, and he was one of the offices. And we were there kicking it, and in comes Teddy with some friends of his. And I hadn't seen Teddy in a few years. You know, we'd known each other, but you know, I hadn't seen. So, hey man, how you doing? Whatever. So, and in fact, I actually took a picture of Teddy that afternoon. I had my camera with him. It's the last picture of Teddy. I think I made a copy of it, you know, that Alan gave to James, I think, at the funeral, because Alan went to Teddy's funeral.
Right.
But anyway, Teddy and his friends were in New York, and that evening they were going to drive up to Canada. I forget if they were going to Montreal or Toronto or somewhere around anyway. But he just said, Eric, you know, what are you doing? Do you want to come up to going up? And I said, it probably wasn't something that I would have necessarily done anyway, but specifically I wasn't, because I was in New York to see the jazz gigs.
Yeah.
So I said, "Oh man, Teddy, thanks. But I'm here this week. I got tickets for all these gigs, so I'm here for the week. So great to see you have fun." And whoever was driving the car that night, it was assumed that fell asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
And the car lost control of the car. And
all evidence points to that, even though there were some other.
Yeah, I believe it was 3 of them, maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think everybody died.
Yeah, I think that's
crash.
right. But
And
the fact of the matter is that if you had accepted that offer, we may not be talking to you.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, maybe I would have been the one driving. Maybe I would. I hate to say, I hate to suggest that I would have been the hero that would have saved everyone. No, but anyway, the next morning we got the call.
Yeah.
From that, and we're just sitting there. Said, "Oh shit, yeah." No,
but Teddy was on college break at that point or something like that, because he had just gone to university or something.
Yeah. He was. I think he was maybe a year younger than me, but I mean, basically,
you were close in age. Yeah.
Yeah, and sweetheart of a guy. I mean, really, just it's just an absolute shame. Just a really, really cool guy. Yeah.
I'd like to hear your perspective on that, and what a shame. I mean, and I'm sure James carried that with him as I can't imagine.
Teddy was his first child. Would have been his oldest by his first wife.
Yeah.
And it was just horrible. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
in fact, it was my understanding that James played a gig that night.
Yes.
The night that he basically just said, "I don't know what else to do. If I cancel a gig and sit, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to go out of my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and do the gig."
Compartmentalization. He just compartmentalized, did his job, and
yeah.
I get it. And as my father passed away recently at the end of June, I had a gig that next night, and I just decided to go ahead. There wasn't any need for me to be there that night, but this is now about 6-7 years ago, 7-8 years ago, when Paul Peterson, the day his mother passed away, she had been in hospice for a while, so that the family knew that she was, it was imminent. The day that she passed, that evening, D'Angelo was in town playing at First Avenue, doing that Brothers in Arms duo gig that he would occasionally do a Questlove, just the two of them. And Paul and I played with them that night. So Paul we did the sound check. Paul went home knowing that his mother, that was imminent that his mother might pass at any time. She passed that afternoon. And Paul called me to let me know, because I knew his mother real well. I knew Gene. We all knew Gene real well. And I said, "Paul, don't sweat it. We're just sitting in with him, so it's not like you have to be here." And he said, "Oh no, man, I got to be there." And Paul came to the gig and he played. And I said, "You sure? Everything, D'Angelo and Questlove were all." I said, "You okay?" And he said, and Paul just laughed and he said, "If my mother knew that I was going to cancel a gig just because she died, she would have come out of the grave and killed me." Musicians. But that was a humor. That was the humor
that's the way he dealt with it. Yeah. But yeah. So
that's something. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, a little more a brighter topic. There was a notorious girlfriend of Jimi Hendrix's at one point. He talks about the book and was hitting on everybody and tried to seduce everybody. I think you might have been in the picture at that point.
I think Alan's reference to me, and that was perhaps a little bit of journalistic
license.
License.
Oh, okay.
I vaguely remember a girl that years later was told to me, this was this crazy girlfriend of Jimi Hendrix. I never put the 2 and 2 together at the time. So if she had said something to me, to be absolutely honest, I don't remember. You know why? It was the Spectrum Auditorium in Philadelphia.
Oh, the old Spectrum. Oh, yeah.
The old Spectrum. James was playing. This was when Bootsy was in the band. This is the Bootsy Collins rhythm section. Clyde Stubblefield on drums and Jabbo. and the Dells, the singing group, the Dells, were the opening act. Now, the Dells happen to be, to this day, is still my personal favorite singing group of all time.
Yeah,
I was a Dells fanatic then, and the place was sold out to the max. 12, 13,000 people. It's a revolving stage, a rotating stage in the middle, in the center.
Yeah.
And the Dells were on stage, and the Dells were killing. I mean, they were hot. This is when they were at the peak of their career, 1970, whatever.
Yeah.
They're killing. And James Brown, and I'm digging the Dells, but I also was going kind of back and forth between James's dressing room and the side of the stage where I could sit and watch the gig.
You had a great spot.
The door to James's dressing room was open. James is hearing everything that's going on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And James is pacing back and forth in his dressing room, and he is screaming. And he said, "Get those motherfuckers off my stage. That's embarrassing. Who? That shit up there. That's crap. Who let them on my stage? I'm going to open from." I mean, he is having a fit.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, "Oh, this is freaking great." Because James Brown is the ultimate competitor. He knew those cats are out there. They are killing. Now, James Brown in August 1970, he's riding high on Sex Machine and Superbad. So he ain't really got anything to worry about, but that's his house.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm just saying, I looked at Alan and we just laughed because that's James Brown getting ready. That's him doing that to get himself pumped.
Yeah.
The Dells left the stage and they had killed.
Yeah.
I swear to God, James's band now, intermission, James is on stage. The band hits the introduction, whatever they were hitting, and they're killing whatever. I think it was the song, "It's a New Day." That they're just hitting it. In order to get to the stage, James had to come down the aisleway from backstage. But since the stage is in the center, they got to get him through some of the crowd.
Yeah.
That's hanging over,
So
he had a bodyguard at the time that Alan talks about in the book. His nickname was Baby James. He was a big, tall guy. He literally picked James up off the ground and hugged him, and basically would run through the crowd up to the stage and basically just threw James up onto the stage.
Kind of like Chick Huntsberry doing to Prince.
Yeah. But here's the deal. I remember that the stage was carpeted. There was a thick shag rug on the stage.
Well, that sounds like the 70s to me.
Yeah. So here's the deal. The Dells had just killed. I mean, everybody in that set waiting for James. James Brown flew up out of the air. You saw him just kind of come up out of the air, out of the crowd. He lands on the stage. The shirt he's wearing was almost already torn off of him. He hits the stage.
Wow.
And there's the microphone. He hits one end and comes just all of a sudden, where's James? Boom, out of the air. He lands in one split, two splits, three splits, gets up, turns around, does a couple backflips, whatever he does, grabs the microphone and is into it. And my impression of that was that there were 13,000 people. And at that point in their mind, what was going through their heads was, the Dells? Who the fuck are the Dells?
Right.
James hadn't even sung a note yet, and he had already wasted them. And the Dells killed. You understand? If that had been the end of the show, everyone would have walked away saying, "Man, the Dells killed."
Yeah.
But here comes James Brown, and backstage, he's pitching a fit because he says, "I'm going to hit," and everybody in 5 seconds is going to know this is my house. Show. This is my house.
Now, was this one of your top? Now, of the shows that you've seen James Brown do, and you've seen a crap ton of them, was that one of your top gigs?
That was one of the better ones. My absolute favorite ones were in Pittsburgh, Easter Sunday, 1967, and the next night in Richmond, Virginia, because my brother and I were in high school.
Yeah,
we were on Easter break.
Yeah.
So we flew the next day to Richmond, where we had lived before.
Yeah.
And we had friends there to see James Brown the next night. Those were the two most memorable gigs of James Brown, because that was the great James Brown band, the best band he ever had. The interesting thing was, Maceo had not come out of the service yet. Maceo wasn't there, but everybody else was. And that's the first time, that's when I was really had the opportunity to stand by the side of the stage and in line with those three drummers and feel and hear those three drummers kicking in tandem on some of the out vamps of some of the songs. And I always say, that's, if there's any place that I lost my musical virginity, it was that night. You know, and it was basically the idea that I'm a saxophone player. I'm not going to be a singer, dancer, or, you know, like, I want to be a jazz saxophone player. But any music that I create, somehow it's got to make me feel what I'm feeling now. And if I can somehow, you know, this is the template, this is the standard, what I'm feeling now, this is why I'm going to do this. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And so
you had the bar set awfully high at such a young age, so that when people hear you talk about your times playing with Prince, you're like, guys, you have no idea what I got to see before I got to Prince. Because Prince is an amalgamation of, you know, so many different artists, and he's incredible. I mean, listen, obviously I'm a huge Prince fan, but as I get older, I look at the amalgamation that he is. He's got Little Richard, James Brown, all these different, a little bit of Hendrix, a lot of bit of Santana, especially in his guitar playing.
A lot of Sly Stone.
A lot of Sly Stone. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the best of all of those elements. But you know, the template you watched the birth of the template that would later be an influence on some of the
it was my blessing and my curse, because I actually did something one night that I felt bad about, not only from the fact that I shouldn't have said it, only for several reasons. First of all, because I said that this is my boss, which isn't necessarily the best thing. We had come off a gig one night, and I think it was with the parade band, you know, when Wendy and Lisa were still in the band, when the first runs of gigs that I was doing.
Yeah.
And we came off a gig one night, and it was a really, really good gig. I mean, we were killing it that night, really just cool. And Prince was, you know, he was in a really good mood. And after the gig, he was coming to different people. I think we had a little party, you know, after at the hotel or whatever. And Prince was one of his, you know, great gig, whatever. And he was coming to everyone. And I didn't even think about it, because it was just like, okay. Prince came up to me and said something about this, man. And I just said, yeah, man, it was a hip gig tonight. We were killing it. And I think I almost was kind of looking at Bliston. Matt was standing next to me, and without even thinking, I looked at man and said, yeah, we were killing the night, man. It almost reminded me of that night in 1967 when James was. And as soon as I said that, Prince was looking at me, and he just like, oh man, he didn't say anything, but it was like, oh, you know, and as soon as I said that, I said, oh shit, you know, why did I say that? Now, Prince didn't say anything, but Prince just kind of walked away and said, oh fuck. You know, and I felt bad because it was irrelevant. I mean, for one thing, you know, but to your point, it was like, I can't help but compare almost everything after that to what I was going through and what registered and resonated, because it was the benchmark. It was my way of feeling this gig we did tonight was really so cool, because that was my benchmark. So it was like, almost reminded me, it was almost hip. Yeah, we were on we were as hip tonight as that was back then. And of course that isn't something that Prince wanted to hear or needed to hear. No. So after that, I said, I need to shut the hell up. When Prince gives a comment, I said, Prince, you're right. We were killing, leave it at that.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before. I mean, you know, I think later in his life, he would have understood it, but at that moment, you don't want to kill his high off the fact that that you guys, and let me tell you something. I mean, some of those counter revolution gigs, I mean, I've heard Boots. I did. Unfortunately, you guys didn't do a whole lot. You did a couple warm up shows in the States, and then went off to do more in Europe with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the whole stripped down thing, and he wasn't really playing a whole lot of guitar. But
I was playing hardly any guitar on that. On
yeah,
those gigs.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. Chris, do you have any questions for Eric while we're?
Actually, no, I'm just sitting here soaking everything in, enjoying the stories, because it's incredible to me to hear, you know, James Brown being pushed on stage and doing the splits
Oh,
three
yeah.
times, and it's just mind blowing to be here. So I'm just enjoying it and soaking it all in.
All right. Well, if you can think of anything, chime in. You know.
Yeah, I know you wanted to mention Crucial.
Yes, yes, the saxophone
okay.
version, which to me is the superior version of that track. And I'm a little upset with Prince that he was, you know, a little miffed that you put the saxophone solo where the guitar solo was supposed to go. But I really hope I really hope the estate officially releases it at some point, because to me it's one of the finest moments on record for Prince, and especially for you, in my opinion, it's one of your finest recordings that you did.
Well,
for
thank you, man.
Prince.
I appreciate that.
I really really love it. So
Well, thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll pull it out and listen. I'll pull it out and listen to it sometime. I've listened to that. I can't remember the last time I've listened to it. Yeah, I think I have.
Wish we could have a listening party with you, Eric.
It was a misunderstanding that I came in the session and pretty sure it was Susan who was the engineer, and he had just left instructions to have Eric put a solo at this spot or whatever, and either Susan misunderstood or I misunderstood. So this is where I put the solo, you know, and if I do recall, it was a rather lengthy solo. So,
Right.
You know, and then later Prince kind of, I don't think Prince was pissed, because I mean, obviously we didn't wipe, you know, we didn't erase, you know, what was there. I mean, his guitar solo was still on the tape. So obviously we're not erasing anything, but he just kind of rolled his eyes and said, no, that isn't where I wanted you to put the solo. So I said, well, okay. I'm trying to remember if I did go back and put another solo in the spot where he actually wanted it.
You might
So
have.
somewhere
There's
there
an
might be
alternate
a
version. I think.
yeah. So there might be an alternate with a shorter solo in a different location. So I don't really recall on that. But
I would say to that, I would say the longer solo deserves to be heard in its full glory officially, because it's like I say, it's one of my top recordings that I love. And
Yeah,
controversial opinion time, I actually prefer Crucial to Adore. So there you go.
as a song, I probably did too. Just personal taste. My problem with The Door was I thought the mix was horrible.
Yeah, I can see that. I can
my
definitely see that.
Yeah, and here was the thing. Some of the horn lines on it. If I recall, I'm pretty sure that pretty much everything that the horns played on that song, The Door, was Prince's. I don't think that was, you know, I mean, it's possible that there might have been a little line that might have been mine. But I think pretty much that was his. And there were some really nice parts on that.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always a standard thing that all horn players want to hear the horns louder than anything else. All bass players want to hear the bass, you know, on and on and on. So there's always that.
Sure.
I didn't object to the volume of where the horns were placed in the song. I just thought the EQ on the horns was god awful on that mix. The horns sound like gnats, like they sound like buzzing mosquitoes, and they're annoying. And my whole point is, I don't want to hear the horns like that. I wish that was how the horns are going to come out sounding. I wish he hadn't put any horns on the damn song at all. That's his personal, you know, that's his personal opinion. So, you know,
Cool.
but that was my, so whenever I think of that song, I'd say, oh man, I don't like listening to that because it annoys me.
Oh,
So
I love Adore, but I'll have to
it's
go
a
back now and
it's a
listen to it and
great
see
it's
what
a
you're
great
saying.
song. Yeah, it's a nice song. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Um, Chris, you made me think of speaking of saxophone, parts which weren't used on the final product and that Sign of the Times album. I really like the saxophone version of Ballad of Dorothy Parker, and Ballad of Dorothy Parker is one of those that you've described this, Eric, as a boutique that's uniquely a Prince song.
Yeah.
But I actually like the sax part that you put on there.
Well, here's I appreciate that. When we had all had what we considered to be the final mix of that song, without any horns or anything on it, just as it was released. And of course, there's a famous story that the tape machine was out of sync, that there was an issue with the tape machine that yielded the kind of
Susan talks about it sounding like it was underwater. The EQing wasn't right or something.
Right. Yeah. There was something out of the machine was out of phase or something like that. That song actually is one of my absolute favorite Prince songs. I mean, I really do like that song an awful lot. I was surprised when Prince asked me to put horns on it, because my feeling was, really, I thought this song was done. I mean, it's like, it was an after the fact. Prince was not at the recording session for that. He basically said, have at it. Okay. Just go in, you and Bliston, go in, write some, whatever, just screw around with it, see what you come up with. And I think my attitude towards it was, because I liked the song so much, my attitude, I think, was, well, I'm going to make this mine. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, wow, what if this was my song? So I just kind of went in and did that. So if you really listen, as much as, now the interesting thing also is that I never had a copy of that. For whatever reason, I never took away my own copy. I would usually get copies of stuff that I did. For whatever reason, that night, I didn't come out of the studio with a cassette of that. So I never had a version of it until it came out in the box set, what a year ago, whenever that box set came out. And I remember that, I was not surprised that Prince did not use the horns. I don't even know if I had a conversation with him about it. It wasn't, I generally was not somebody that was going to lead with my chin. I generally did not go up to Prince and say, did you like the horns? Are you going to use them? That wasn't, Prince was either going to do what he did and fine, So when he decided when he didn't use the horns, I was not surprised. Yeah. And my own opinion was, this song really did not need any horns to begin with. So
it's still cool to hear it though. And
well,
sonically, I thought the mix was pretty good with it.
Well, that might have been a rough mix that existed, from back then. I don't know. Years later, I was cleaning out a file cabinet of mine with a bunch of just sheets of music. Oh, wow. And I pulled out this sheet of music, and there was no title on the music. And I'm looking and I said, what the hell is this? So I put it on piano, I'm playing on piano. I said, oh shit, this is what I wrote for Dorothy Parker.
Oh shoot.
So I put a little note on, put it back in the file, and I said, well, that's the only thing that I have of that. So then obviously they finally released it. So finally I had an opportunity to actually say, well, let me listen to this shit and see what this shit is about. Oh my God. And my opinion is still the same. The song did not need the horns. Yeah. Now, if you're asking me about the individual lines, I liked what I wrote.
Yeah.
The lines. And I got to tell you, you may find someday you might hear some of those lines in an LP song.
Cool.
I'll recycle anything, but I listened to it and I said, yeah, I know damn well why Prince didn't use this, because basically I didn't do anything that really was going to add value to what was there. My attitude was, this is now going to be my song. And oh yeah, it's going to be a song for horns and vocal accompaniment,
Sure.
which is not quite the point.
But you
you know.
wanted to, but you had to put yourself in that mindset, because otherwise you wouldn't have felt like you were going to add anything to the song if you didn't feel.
Probably not. Now,
No.
the interesting thing also is that I never ever remember that we never performed that song live.
Yeah,
When we started doing rehearsals for what became the Sign of the Times tour,
yeah.
we did play that song a few times in rehearsal, but it never, after a couple of weeks, it went away and never
But
came back.
You
But
did during the One Night Alone tour, though. Did bring that into the One Night Alone tour? I don't know whether when you played.
years later, years later he might have, yeah.
Did
But
you end up playing
the,
horns on that version?
I never played it with him then either.
Okay.
That I recall, yeah.
Okay.
But the few times that we actually played it in rehearsal, in the Sign of the Times rehearsals, I put in a whole different, or Prince and I think, came up with a whole different thing for the horns to do. And all we did was do eggshells,
Okay.
pads, whole notes. All we did was behind on the chords, as he's singing the song, you just hear the horns softly in the background, just adding to the harmony of the keyboards, just plain whole notes. Whatever the harmonic progression, that's all it was. And it worked really, really well. So if I had really had the mindset, let me just add something that just supports what's already there, then Prince might have used it. But that, like I said, that was, when I went in the studio, was just like it. Prince would sometimes do that. He would give me a bunch of stuff to just go in and mess around with. And I always took it as a great compliment, because he's saying, maybe Eric will come up with something that I can use.
Mm-hmm.
But I just said, this is this guy giving me his music and just loaning it to me for a night. And I can go in the session and do whatever I want with it. And I'm still getting paid, whether he uses it or not.
Well, you started from the get-go, to Camille's point earlier, and I think, Camille, you do have a question as well, that you started from the get-go. All right, Prince, listen, I've never met you before. I'm ready to roll when you're ready to roll. And I think you earned his respect more than anything, that, okay, this guy can jump in with both feet when I ask him to go dive in the deep end of the pool and see what I can create, see what I can do.
And the benefit that I just got to remember this, to anything that he heard or he wanted, that he might have wanted on horn, he couldn't do it. Right. So that gave me a license in his band at the time, that by the nature of the fact of the instrument that I played, that he couldn't play it. And for the trumpet, it gave us a license that nobody else was going to have. Yeah. I used to just make the joke about it. And it said, anybody that has any aspirations to be involved to whatever extent in contributing to Prince's music, the first thing you do is don't be stupid enough to play an instrument in Prince's band that he plays.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, because particularly Wendy and Lisa contributed an awful lot to what was going on in Prince's music at that time, and certain other musicians, long after I was, no longer involved with them, I'm sure did too. But we were the first ones in his band that basically, regardless if it was a specific idea or whatever, it had to come through us.
Yeah.
And that was completely different experience for him and how he made music. So and knowing that, it was like, you don't think I'm not going to take advantage of that? Hell yeah. Yeah. So
he probably thought that you would have, like, I'm just assuming, I don't know, but a better creative process if he would just, like, leave you alone in the studio when no one's watching, or he's not there, or you're not. I don't know.
There's a sense of trust there.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I did learn over a period of time, because here's the thing. After he passed away, and I was doing a bunch of interviews, And people were usually, the first thing that everyone was talking about was the vault, the
Yeah.
legacy of all the music in the vault. And because I had done so many recording sessions, and off the top of my head, in fact, my brother and I were on MSNBC with Brian Williams for 5 or 10 minutes talking about it. And Brian Williams asked me about, okay, so you're the saxophone player, what about the vault? And I said, Brian, here's the thing. I said, I may have done over the years maybe 50 or 60 recording sessions with him. My point is that probably 80 to 90% of the sessions that I did with Prince has never been released. But I was curious. I went home and I pulled out my journals and I started counting. I actually ended up doing over close to 150, 175 sessions with him. But the percentage still is the same. The vast majority of stuff that I did with recording sessions is still in the vault, has never been released. Over a period of time, I realized that the songs that he cared the most about were the songs that he was going to be in the studio with us. If it was something that he was saying, hey, ask Eric or tell Eric, or he'll call me and say, Eric, go in the studio when you can and put something on this song. More often than not, that told me that song wasn't going to be a priority. That the chances of that song actually ending up being released was less likely. To speak to your point, Camille, the interesting thing is that I actually enjoyed the recording sessions doing it with him more than I did it doing on my own. Because when he's with him, I have to react to a different process and a different creative process. I know what I can do and what I'm going to do. What's interesting to me is what I need to do that he wants me to do in the here and now. I want to be in the moment with his creative process because that's going to be more interesting for me. Because one time he told me and Matt, he said, on this song, I need you two to approach the song as if you've never played your instruments before. And I laughed and I said, Prince, that's exactly what Miles Davis used to tell Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock and Tony Williams. He said, I don't want to hear what you know. I want to hear what you don't know. And that was Prince's way of saying the same. I'm trying to find something different. So roll with me, guys, because I'm hearing something different. Roll with me. And when he would say that, that's when I would say, this is going to be a fun session. It might be a long session, but it's going to be a fun session. And those were ones that I generally did enjoy the most, just because I enjoyed being a part of his creative process. Now, once again, there was no guarantees or expectations that the end result was necessarily something that I was going to want to go home and listen to. Might not, whether the song was something I liked, because Prince wasn't asking us to come in the studio and record. He was telling us it was our job. I need you guys in the studio at 8 o'clock. Better be there. And I'm coming in. Prince has a smile on his face, and he's excited about the music, but he's not playing us the music and saying, hey, would you like to play on this song? Gee, I'd love it if you like to play on this song. Would you like to play on this song? Get your horns out. This is what I need you to do. And that's what I enjoyed about it.
It's weird that you say that you're like, he didn't ask us, he told us, because even Elisa, Kurt, she's like, yeah, he would call and be like, you're going to be doing a performance tomorrow. And she's like, what? Okay. Yeah, here's the tickets. Okay. And she's like, okay, I guess I got to cancel everything, drop everything and go do it. And I mean, it's interesting to me to even hear that, because it's like, what happens if you said no? I mean, did you ever think that you don't own anything to him? I mean, it sounds mean.
Here's the difference. At that period of time, I was signed to an exclusive employment agreement with him.
Oh.
So this was my job, But here's the thing. I bought an answering machine on my phone. And I know what, and once, after a few years of like getting, in the first year or so, if Prince calls you at 2 a.m, it's like, wow, okay, cool. But after a while, it's like, It's 2 a.m. I don't want to hear from anybody, least of all him. So I had an answering machine. So now I have plausible deniability because all he can do is leave a message or have, whoever's going to call me on his behalf and say, left a message with Eric. That's all I can do.
Yeah, and you can be
I can
like,
say
well,
that-
I was sleeping. I don't know.
I was like, yeah, or I was at the movies or whatever.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how it must have been working with him in the age of cell phones, because this was before. Now, years later, when I was no longer under his employment and he wanted me to do a session, then usually he would have Therese or someone from the office call and said, hey, Prince has got something he needs you to do. And more often, years later, it was me going in by myself and doing something.
Like this little ditty?
That I think he was in the studio with me on
I wanted
that
to
one.
ask whether he was in the studio with you or
Yeah,
not.
I think he was. I'm pretty sure he was on that. But
Okay.
most of the sessions by then, he was just leaving, give me a call. And I would just say, okay, I can come in. I would always ask, when does he need it? And of course, they would always say, he needs it yesterday. Okay, cool. So,
Of course.
It was basically, but yeah, at that point in time, there were a couple of times where Prince might want me to come in that evening, and I would do it if I felt like doing it or if I was available. If I wasn't, I would just say, I'm not available. I can do it tomorrow or the next day, and he's going to have to live with that. Yeah.
With regards to the last project that you worked on him with him, News, correct? That would be the last album.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
How did that all come about? How did you get the call for that?
Just got the call one afternoon. They said, you available to come in tonight? And I said, yeah. So I said, bring your horns. I forget if he called me or if somebody in the office called me.
Yeah.
Had no idea what, the circumstance is going to be. The interesting thing about that's there are 4 selections on that album. Each
Right.
one roughly is about 14 or 15 minutes long.
Mhm.
That's the sum total of the time that was spent recording each one of those.
Shh.
Yeah. Prince may have put some overdubs on it. I really don't know. I don't really recall.
Yeah.
We were in Studio B, and this was nothing new for me because I had done sessions like them, like this back in the day very
Sure.
often, instrumental jams like this.
Yeah.
And basically the process is real simple. The rhythm section was set up in the main room. John, it was Blackwell, Rhonda, and Renato on keyboards. They're set up in the main room. Prince was in the control booth. I was in an isolation booth with my horns, so there was isolation on the horns.
Yeah.
Prince has a talkback mic, that's coming into our headphones. So he's basically narrating the process as it's going on.
Wow.
Which is what he always would do. So basically, he would say, "Okay, let's start with this. Here's the tempo. What key do you want?" Sometimes he'd say, "Let's start in F," or sometimes he'd just say, "So what key do you want to begin with?" And I would say, rhetorical question, or not to whoever said, "Well, let's start in A flat," or whatever. So we got a key. Said, "All right, John, here's the groove. Give me this tempo. Give me some kind of whatever." That's all. Hit it. Now, as it's going on, I'm sitting back. Now, I'm the fly on the wall because I'm not part of the rhythm section. So I get the luxury to sit back and see, well, where are these guys going?
Yeah.
And so at a point in time, Prince is going to say to me through the talk, through the headphones, "All right, Eric, here's the groove. I need some kind of melodic line that could be a melody, something melodic, or whatever." And said, and I said, "What do you want, tenor, baritone?" He said, "What do you feel like?" I said, "I'm feeling baritone on this one." Cool, go with it. Got a baritone, play something. As I'm playing, Prince is still talking. He might be telling Renato, "Check what Eric is doing now, tag that," or whatever. Meanwhile, he's saying, "Okay, Eric, wrap that up. Give me 8 bars in between, and then come in with something completely different as a counterpoint to what you just did."
Mm-hmm.
This is the process. And he said, now usually he'll let me go for a while. If I'm going a little long, Prince is going to let me know, He said, all right, Eric, your time is over.
Yeah, done.
Yeah, exactly. All right, tail it off. Renato, you're up next. Continue from that. 15 minutes later, we're done. Song's done. On to the next. That's it.
So, and he would never utilize that technique live ever, I suppose. Or
No,
no.
not
Yeah.
really. No.
But you guys lived, that was all spontaneous jams right there. No redoing anything, no nothing.
Yeah. Like I said, Prince, Prince might have,
He might have thrown something.
I don't recall he played guitar on that, right?
Yeah.
Was he? Yeah. I assume he was playing with us live. He would have been playing with, sitting at the control room playing. Whether he did any other overdub synth or I don't know. I don't really know, because all I have is the actual CD. Because literally, hour and a half later, session's over. I'm in my car going home. So, basically it was like, where to send the check. I was laughing and say, the story about, maybe I said this before. It's one of my favorite stories about this kind of attitude. The Billy Joel song from the late 70s, "Love You Just the Way You Are,"
Yeah.
which is one of the, Billy Joel's biggest hits. And of course, there's a saxophone solo in that. It's Phil Woods, one of the most iconic jazz alto saxophone players in the history of this music. And Phil Woods, I knew Phil Woods a little bit. I knew cats that played with Phil Woods. Phil Woods did not take prisoners. He was a very outspoken guy, and he really did not give a goddamn about pop music. He was a hardcore, hard bop jazz guy. So the story goes that he's called in to do the session with this guy named Billy Joel.
Wow.
That Phil Woods maybe, whether Phil Woods even know who Billy Joel was, who knows? Anyway, Billy Joel is a huge fan of Phil Woods, and like he's a young artist, and he said, I can get Phil Woods to play on my record. Oh boy, let's, so got Phil Woods. Phil Woods going to come and play on your record, on the song. So the story goes, whether this is hyperbole or not, I don't know, but it makes a good story. But knowing Phil Woods, this is probably the way it went down. Phil Woods comes in, they play him the track, and Billy Joel is gushing, it's Phil Woods. Oh my God, it's Phil Woods. He said, Phil, here's where the solo goes. And Phil was, all right, let me hear it so I get the changes right. Okay, fine, hit it. Phil Woods plays a solo. Done. One take. That's it. Billy Joel's rewinding the tape, wanting to listen to the playback. I got Phil Woods. That's a great solo on my song. Phil Woods already has his horn in his case. He's walking into the control room just to be sure everything's cool. And Billy Joel looks at him and says, well, it was great. It was terrific. I said, do you think there's any reason to do, would you like to do a second take? And supposedly Phil Woods looks at him and said, hey, kid, you wanted a Phil Woods solo. You got a Phil Woods solo. Here's where to send the check. Have a nice life. Out of the studio. And it's like, now I ain't Phil Woods. Trust me, I ain't Phil Woods. But there's a little bit, but it's basically the same thing as say, Prince, you know what I can give you. You're looking for what I'm going to give you. Here it is. And the same with everyone in the band. Because really, most of the time, when you're doing a solo or anything, whether it was an 8-bar solo or whatever it was, whatever is the first thing you play is what Prince is going to want. He wants the immediacy of it. So you better have something to throw against the wall and see if it sticks. There were other times when I would say, I could maybe do something. Occasionally, I would say to Prince, I can give you a different approach. And occasionally he said, all right, give me another approach. So he, so it might be 2 or 3 solos, and he would just, but almost all the time, the first thing that you play is what he's going to use. So you better have something that's going to work. And a lot of times, the less time you have to think about it, the better it's going to be.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So.
All right. I am going to throw one last artist out, and then I have some kind of like pop hit type questions
Okay.
for
I can
you,
give you
if
maybe
don't mind.
another
And unless
half hour or
anybody
so.
else
Yeah,
wants
that's
to
cool.
ask Eric any questions, but I would be remiss if I didn't remember to ask you about your guy, Branford Marsalis.
Yeah. When his brother Wynton hit
Mhm.
in the early 80s and became like this phenom. And of course, we were all checking Wynton out. I mean, yeah. But I'm hearing the saxophone on these albums, and I say, whoa, who is that? And I said, oh, Branford, that's his brother. Okay, cool. I fell in love with Branford's playing. And his sound, particularly on tenor, but even soprano, and it kept just getting better. So anyway, during the 80s, Branford, I became just a huge, huge fan of Branford. And not only his playing, but his music,
Sure.
everything about it, just everything that what he was. I said, man, this cat is, this cat is the real deal. So this is now, I think it was 1989.
Yeah.
I was since after I was no longer in Prince's band.
Yeah.
That band, it was after the Love Sexy band broken up and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Branford and his group were playing in Minneapolis. His drummer at the time, Jeff Tane Watts, the great drummer, was from Pittsburgh. And I knew Jeff was from Pittsburgh. I didn't know Jeff when I lived in Pittsburgh because I was older enough and doing, I was in a different circuit.
Yeah.
In bands. But I do recall a little about hearing about this young cat who was like this tremendous drummer, but we had never met. So anyway, I was really interested in meeting Jeff because we could sit and talk about Pittsburgh. So anyway, I went to the gig and I not only hear the music, but I wanted to meet Branford. What I did not know is that, self-serving as it sounds, that Branford was very aware of me from my work with Prince. And first thing he asked me, he had heard the Black Album, he had heard, it had a bootleg. And the first thing he said, introducing it, and I was like, Jeff, man, it's finally great to meet you, coming from Pittsburgh with a homeboy, and everything. But Branford said, no, screw that. He said, Leeds, I got to know one thing right now. Who wrote Rock Hard in a Funky Place? The horn line for that. And he said, was that you? And he said, and I said, yeah, that was me. And he jumped up and he hugged me and he said, man, I knew that couldn't have been Prince. I knew that had to have been from what I figured that was something that came from you, just from what I can hear in that. Because he could sit and he could tell me, he could say, I know where that shit comes from, and I realized this, I ain't fooling Branford. This is great. So Branford, actually that evening after the gig, we hung out like till 2 or 3 in the morning. So that's when we got to know each other. So
that line you use on Rock Hard at a Funky Place, you use that in the Sign of the Times tour. That was a da 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 da.
Yeah, and it's a song of mine that's called Pacemaker that I have recorded several times and have never yet come up with a version of it that I like well enough to release.
And it's going to be in the next LP Music album. Damn it!
Well, we did record it with LP on the last.
Oh wow,
last
really?
session.
Okay.
I just did not like the way it came out. It just did not have the feel I wanted. I recorded it with Alfonso Johnson and Alice Acuna when we did Things Left Unsaid in 1991, 92. Right. Didn't use that version either.
Oh wow.
The line is really only one part of the song. There's a whole lot else to the song of my song with that. That was just the basic lead line that just fit in what Prince was looking for on Rock Hard in a Funky Place. Now, the thing is, Pacemaker, the song, when we play that line, and even when we would play it in Prince loved the line so much that we would stick it in different, we played it in the Sign of the Time. I think we actually played it somewhere in the Love Sexy show too, I think.
Yeah, I think you did. I know you played it right before you guys would do I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man. I think there was like a little vignette type thing, right?
Yeah. But that's a slow version because when we play it Pacemaker, it's like double that. That's the
okay,
tempo
okay,
where
okay.
it's supposed to be. You
More
know?
like bop stuff. Okay.
Yeah, it's a hard bop thing.
Hard bop, right.
Yeah. So anyway,
Cool insight. This, see, I never would have known that. And you slow it down and it's not that. But when you
Right,
just
yeah,
taking the tempo of that.
Yeah. Now the thing,
Crazy.
you know, the thing is that there was an alto saxophone player, Eric Dolphy. He was an iconic jazz saxophone player. He died at a very young age in 1964.
Yeah.
But he played with Charlie Mingus, had a lot of albums of his own. And I you know, got pretty much everything he ever recorded. He had a song back in the day on an album of his, and the song was called Miss Anne. And I don't think necessarily, I don't know if I had that song of Eric Dolphy's in my head when I wrote that line. But after I did it, I realized, wow, this kind of reminds me a little bit of this old Eric Dolphy song. So it's like, you know, it all comes from somewhere.
Oh, sure. I mean,
You know,
again, we talked about the 12 notes in the Western scale. I mean, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So the influences and the things that I have in my head, sometimes it's like I'll come up with a line and I'll say, is that my line, or is that just a complete ripoff from something that's been floating around in my head for like 30 years? You know, Paul McCartney, you know, the famous sort of Paul McCartney, when he wrote Yesterday,
he dreamed
when
it,
he
dreamt
wrote
it.
that song, he asked everybody around him, the other guys in the group, George Martin, all, they said, have you ever heard this melody before? Because I wrote this, I don't know if this is mine, or if I've heard this before. Fortunately for McCartney and everyone else, everyone said, no, I've never heard that before.
Thank
But
God.
McCartney was not convinced that it wasn't something that he had almost verbatim copied from someone. You know, so, yeah.
Wow. Eric, what can I tell you, man? I could spend all day. I really could. I don't have to go to work today, I think, but I do appreciate your time. I really do, and I appreciate everybody here today. I'm going to ask you some pop hit questions because there's just some things I just want to know. You know, when you're not playing the horn, when you're not playing the flute. I did want to know what kind of reeds you use on your horns. Do you have them custom made?
He goes, oh God.
Oh God, yeah. Let me just say first of all, I can't talk about reeds without basically, there is no product of any product that is made that is by definition something that you cannot return once you have realized it does not work.
Yeah.
Because the only way to know whether a reed works or not is to put it in my mouth.
Yeah.
And once it's in my mouth and I know this doesn't work, I can't do anything with it but throw it away.
Yeah, shit.
You know, and I really have, I wonder about, now obviously you're making a product that is made from a plant.
Yep.
So obviously there's a lot of variables there.
Yep. Yeah.
But here's the thing, the cynic in me says, you know, if a reed company really does have the technology to be able to make a box of 10 reeds that are all consistent, why on earth would they? Because that is going to cut into their sales and profit margins. Because basically I can buy a box of 10 reeds, and if one of them is cool or two of them, I'm happy.
Wow.
You know, so as far as the brands go, I go back and forth between what is now called Diodario Jazz Select reeds. They used to be called Rico reeds years ago.
They bought them out. Diodario bought them out. Yeah.
I go between Jazz Select reeds. I use those when I use Regati reeds.
Okay.
They have two lines. They have a queen reed and a gold reed. I usually go for the Regati queens. I have found another brand recently called, I think it's called Woodstone, that I've tried and had some limited success with. It's a crapshoot.
Wow.
It's an entire crapshoot. My advice to anybody that wants to play a reed instrument, buy a flute. You know, you'll spend $10,000 on a top of the line saxophone, and within about 5 years, you might spend $15,000 trying to find reeds.
Goddamn reed.
You know, yeah. It's crazy. It's nuts. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, Speaking of flutes, what is your go-to flute for a lot of the recording sessions that you've done?
Um, I have had my old Gemeinhardt flute that I've had since the early 70s,
Okay, Meinhardt.
which works for me. A few years ago, I bought a really, really nice flute by a Chinese manufacturer called Dezhou. And I had it for about 2 years, and it was a wonderful flute, but it was above my pay grade. I could not, when I could get the sound centered on it, it sounded wonderful. But the cut of the embouchure plate was just different enough for my Gemeinhardt that I literally realized, you know something, I can't play this flute the way I want to.
Because your muscles have been trained to play it on the Gemeinhardt in a certain way. So your embouchure was muscle memory.
I ended up selling the Dezhou. I said, you know, let me sell it. So I use my Gemeinhardt still. To be absolutely honest with you, my flute chops have deteriorated by age and the fact that I don't play that much flute any longer.
Okay.
And it's a little, I was never a great flute player. I could do what I could do, but I mean,
Right.
the limitations as a flute player are very severe. So, but even with that, it takes a lot more effort for me to be able to accomplish on flute what I could do a lot easier, even just maybe 5 or 6
On the
years
saxophone.
ago.
Okay.
It's
Well, that
age.
answered another question for me. Excellent. All right, here come the pop hit questions. Get ready.
All right.
Favorite book? Do you have any favorite books?
I don't know if I have a favorite book. One of my favorite authors, who I have read every book he has written, is John Le Carre, the late John Le Carre, the great spy geopolitical thriller novel. I absolutely love his. Graham Greene.
Oh,
Goes,
okay.
Go back. I've read a bunch of his books and enjoyed them thoroughly. As
Cool.
far as there are probably some other novels that I've written, that I've read that I've enjoyed. I mean, I love The Godfather.
Sure.
The Godfather is not. It's a fast. I enjoyed the book. I don't think it's a great book because I don't think Mario Puzo was really that great a writer.
Yeah.
As far as being a writer, but he conveyed the story well enough that I enjoyed the book. Whereas John Le Carre, Graham Greene, I mean, these are really tremendous writers.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of that. I also read a lot of nonfiction books.
Yeah.
Current affairs, and I read Roger Angel, who died several years ago, is the dean of baseball writers. I've read pretty much every book he's read, so I read a lot about baseball.
Cool.
And my love affair with railroads and trains.
Yes.
Now, those aren't books that you read because of the writing. They're basically data books, as much as anything else. So they're almost like reference books. So, but yeah.
Okay. Favorite movie or movies, past, present?
Yeah, favorite movies. Interestingly enough, I have not been to a movie theater to see a first-run movie in probably over 20 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, why
So
do you?
almost all of my
you're on the road so
references,
much.
all of my references are prior to that. Chinatown was one of my favorite movies. The Godfather movie, of those kinds of movies.
Robert Towne doing Chinatown. That's a great screenplay. My God.
Oh no, it's absolutely fabulous.
Yep.
Now, movie-wise, comedy movies are big with me. I'm a fanatic of the Marx Brothers.
Cool.
Yeah, and of their movies, I would say Duck Soup, Night at the Opera, Monkey Business. Those. For the Marx Brothers fanatics, there's always the argument: were the better films the first 5 done for Paramount or the MGM films?
Right.
And the Marx Brothers fanatics always come down on the side of the Paramount films.
Yeah.
Well, Night at the Opera was the first MGM film. It's a classic. But
yeah.
Duck Soup was just. Now, having said that, unfortunately, when you're dealing with movies of any kind from that period of time, whether it's their movies or W.C. Fields movies that I loved, International House, others, it's difficult, but you just kind of have to once again compartmentalize. There is always the racism
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
different
Stereotypes
scenes and
and all that,
different
yeah.
references that is a part of those movies. And I can't justify it. It's a guilty pleasure. That's all I can say. You know,
It was a product
it.
of its time.
It's a product of its time.
Yeah.
And you just have to basically, if you have the ability to understand and go with it, then you have to go with it. You know, but
Yeah.
it's you know, trying to think. Well, Goodfellas.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
that was a terrific movie.
What do I clown? What do I clown? Do I amuse you? How am I funny?
You know, one of the last movies that I remember actually seeing in a movie theater first run years ago was Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh,
That was terrific.
yeah.
That was absolutely, yeah.
All-star cast too.
Yeah, wonderfully wonderful. Jack Lemmon
Well,
and I mean,
one of my
they're all
favorites.
Lemmon. Yeah, I mean, and going back to
Save the Tiger. You know, I'll
Yeah.
even go to China Syndrome. Oh,
Yeah. Now, I mean, the original King Kong, which once
Fay Wray,
again, with
yep.
all the racist tropes about it, I
Mm,
mean, big black ape falls in love with white woman. I mean, gee, okay,
right, right.
all of that. But if you're going to look at that as a movie, it's absolutely spectacular, particularly considering the use and the technology that they were creating at that
with the
point.
miniatures and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, everything. Fascinating movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm sure there are other movies that I say are favorite movies.
No, that's
of
cool.
mine.
This is like off the top of your head. You know.
The thing is basically is that once HBO got into the creating their series,
Yep.
it's like movies didn't mean anything to me because I've now got The Sopranos,
Oh yeah.
which are basically cinematic, really, in a way. And for me, the greatest stories for me was The Wire,
Oh, my hometown.
the benchmark. I mean, once you have The Wire, it's like I don't need anything else. This is like
I have the Blu-ray box set upstairs in my listen, and I have friends who are on season 2.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have turned
because
so
it was
many people
filmed.
on to that. And
Yeah.
every season, it's like, what's your favorite season? It's hard to tell. My favorite season, I think it was season 4, with the 4 kids in school. Absolutely, to me, the greatest series of cinematic, whatever you want it,
Eric, I
series
took my glasses
television or
off for that
whatever
one because
that I have ever
that's-
in my life seen.
Yep.
Yeah.
That
Just
having
beyond.
lived in Baltimore I'm sorry, I said it with a T, Baltimore.
Yeah.
Having lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and having taught in inner city schools, not in Baltimore, but in Chester, Upland, in Pennsylvania. So, which was initially a backup in case Mayor O'Malley, because he was pissed at season 2, because of Mayor Carcetti was basically just a mirror of him.
Oh, right.
And he was pissed off at that, and he was going to shut down production until they're like, oh, we're going to lose all that money. So they kept the series in this. But Chester Upland was a backup city to film in, had that contract in Baltimore fallen through.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
And
Here's some for you.
Yeah.
October 1979.
Yeah.
When I was still living in Pittsburgh, I was playing with the Billy Price Keystone Rhythm Band.
Billy Price, yeah.
Fabulous R&B band. We were playing in Baltimore the night the Pirates clinched the World Series against the Orioles.
oh shit,
Yeah.
that was when Eddie Murray and
Murray, Dave
all the,
Singleton,
Jim Palmer,
Jim Palmer was there, Flanagan.
oh,
Mark Belanger,
and a moment of silence for Brooks Robinson, who just
Brooks
recently
Robinson
passed away.
just passed. Yeah.
Yeah. That he was truly a Baltimore guy, and just beloved by, whether you knew sports or not. He was very philanthropic. He was
Still probably the premier benchmark for third baseman, defensive third baseman. Still to this day. He's going to be the next Brooks Robinson, like Willie Mays. In music, John Coltrane, Miles, James Brown, Stevie Wonder. What did they say about Prince? This might be the next Stevie Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah.
Well, you know, when I hope Steve, I say this every time his name's mentioned. If Steve, I hope Stevie sleeps in bubble wrap every night he goes to bed, because when we lose him,
Yeah.
it's one of the last
I
true
know.
geniuses in that world.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so you kind of answered TV shows, because I was going to go there next, and yeah, The Wire. I mean,
Yeah.
season 2 and season 4, I go between those two.
Yeah.
The first season is great too, but no, you're right. Season
Is
4.
season 2 the one on the wharf?
The one on the wharf and the docks and the unions
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah. Just yeah.
cousin Ziggy.
Yeah. Now to that extent, I was a fanatic for Breaking Bad and of course Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul was just fabulous. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Masterclass in acting, every one of those shows. Okay.
Yeah.
Your favorite food or foods? Like what?
Corned beef or pastrami sandwich from Second Avenue Deli or any one of the great delis in New York.
That was very specific.
Yeah. Well, Carnegie is closed, and actually in the last couple of years of the Carnegie going downhill.
Yeah.
But in any corned beef or pastrami sandwich on that level.
Reuben or just
no. Just basically it's the meat and the bread. And the rye bread. I mean, the rye bread is very important.
Oh yeah.
The rye bread has to be top-notch rye bread. A steak from Smith and Walensky's in New York, from S&W's or the Post House, something like that, or just good prime rib, And there was a Chinese restaurant that was our go-to for years and years in New York that unfortunately closed over 20 years ago. It was on 57th Street between Park and Lex. It was called Bruce Ho's Four C's. And it was an old-style Cantonese, and it was a family restaurant. My dad, got my brother and I into that place. And one of the saddest days in our lives was the day that restaurant closed. Yeah.
Was there anything local around you that you enjoy?
There's actually a really good Italian restaurant just 5 minutes across the highway from me called Ciao Bella. Okay. They have a really good marinara sauce on their pasta that I like.
So now you know what to do if you want to get him on a track, on your track, Kurt. You gotta bring him to a restaurant, feed him some food, and then he's gonna say, "You got your track. Have a good life."
Good life.
Someday, when I actually have a track to bring to him. Your favorite beverage, adult or non-adult?
A hand mixed Coca-Cola.
Ooh.
From the syrup, like they used to do back in the day with the soda fountain. When the syrup was in, and you take a glass of club soda, and press the button, and the syrup comes into the glass, and you mix it up, and there's your Coca-Cola.
What?
Yeah. There's soda. You were a soda jerk. You did that. Yep.
Yeah. If you go to like even a vending machine, anywhere, where you're like any fast food joint, where you're putting your cup under, to get
it's like draft beer versus bottled beer.
The Coke still, I believe, comes in cartons. That's just the syrup, and it's mixed with the carbonated water in the machine. But it used to be at diners and restaurants that there was, the same thing that they used to pump for chocolate syrup on an ice cream sundae. Yep. But instead, in the container is the Coca-Cola syrup. Yep. And that's. Now I like Pepsi also. I go for Pepsi or Coke. Yeah, but if it's the original, Now
sponsor to you, guy.
but it has to be the preference is always the Coke or the Pepsi with real sugar.
Oh well, and in that case, you have to go to Costco or BJ's for the Mexican Coke, where they use the real sugar, not the fructose crap.
Pepsi does sell 12 packs of cans with real sugar too, so I can get that. Yeah, so
cool.
That's it. Yeah,
excellent.
Have you listened to all those records, every single one in the background, or do you
Of
still
course he
got
has.
some to go? Well,
hell
I
yeah.
don't know.
Oh, hell yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Wow.
there are probably a lot of them that it's been years
Yeah.
since, but yeah, there's nothing and then that's just the albums. I've got probably another 300 or 400 albums in my living room. And then my CDs are in another room. And that's I'm probably up to about, 900 or 1,000.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Eric, what's the last record you put on the turntable recently? What were you listening to the other night?
Actually, it was a CD, but it was Coltrane Live at the Half Note 2 nights ago, from 1965.
Okay.
Yeah, that one of those gigs that was found years like the CD actually came out maybe about 5 or 6 years ago or something, but that just happened to be the last thing I might have listened to.
Nice.
Do you have any tracks like at your house? I know Elisa does. She's told us that she's got I don't know what this song is, but it's a very high pitched song, and she recorded it with Prince, and it was like, if you wanna dance, and it was like really high, and Prince never released it. But I mean, what would happen do you have songs that hasn't been released at your house, and what would happen if you released them? Would you get sued by the estate?
Of course you would.
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah.
Why?
Legitimately so, because I don't own the rights to the music.
Right.
I have tons of stuff. Most of the stuff that is the most valuable, the stuff that means the most to me, are the instrumental jam sessions that we did.
Yeah.
Because it's me playing with Prince and his band. And if you didn't know anything about the musicians and listen to most of these jams, you'd think that the band was mine.
Yeah.
By the nature of the role of the instrument.
Yeah.
And, I've got a lot of those. And those are just all spontaneous stuff. And that's the stuff that means the most to me, because like I said, I loved Prince, the musician, but I was never a big fan of Prince, the recording artist.
Yeah.
That's just personal taste.
But you admired his and respected his musicianship. I mean,
he was as remarkable a musician as you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
That was, like I say, that was what was fulfilling and valuable to me about, having the opportunity to be a part of his musical process. Now, if somebody asks me, first of all, what Prince means to me more than anything else, and there were no illusions or guarantee of this, it's this.
Yep. No words.
Oh yeah.
No.
I mean, I'm sorry. Things left on. I'm sorry. I have it right here. Things left unsaid.
When we were we did a third Madhouse album that was never released because both Prince and I weren't crazy about it. Prince then came to me and said in summer of 1989, he said, let's start over for a third Madhouse album. And he said, now, the two Madhouse albums that we had done, of course, it was his project. I mean, Madhouse was Prince. I had a role in Madhouse, but it was completely defined by him. This was not a collaboration to the sense of like what me and Paul Peterson do. I had input, but these were Prince's projects.
He drove the ship.
When it came time to do a second attempt at a third Madhouse album, he had just been contacted by the producers of the Batman movie, wanting him to contribute music for the first Batman album, for the first Batman movie. So he was busy because he had to do it quick. So he basically threw the Madhouse in my lap and basically gave me, I still have them, 4 cassettes consisting of somewhere between 35 and 40 pieces of music from the vault, all unfinished instrumental stuff.
Yeah.
And he gave it to me and he said, start here. Anything that you like from this stuff, have at it to whatever the hell you want to do with it. That yielded my first album that was called Times Squared. But while I'm doing that whole album, it was still supposed to be a Madhouse album. I finished the album. Prince hears the final mixes, the final sequence, and he says to me, I absolutely love it, but here's the thing. It doesn't sound like a Madhouse album any longer. So I said, well, since you basically gave it to me to do, it can't, because I hear music very differently from you, even though, except for one song, everything on that album was originally a Prince track of some sort or another.
Yeah.
But I'm taking it and completely different. And basically, I'm wiping stuff. I'm adding shit. I'm saying, I'm not going to use that. I'll use this. So that's when Prince said, I want to release this album under your name, and I want to sign you to Paisley Park Records.
Yeah.
It's the greatest gift that anyone in his capacity or anyone could do for me, because all my aspirations in music were to be able to make music, my own music.
You know the song Anastasia?
Yeah.
I like that song.
Yes, it's a good song.
It's one of my,
for me, one of his more important ones.
it's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah. But the thing is, here's where anything can go sideways. Prince signed me to a deal with Paisley Park Records that gave me recording budgets that were entirely inappropriate for the music that I make and the reality of the marketplace. He's given me rock and roll music budgets to make progressive instrumental music, the market of which exists is absolutely tiny.
Yeah.
The thing is, and this is where you take advantage of Prince's myopia. Prince's attitude towards me and anybody else at that point is, Eric Leeds is my favorite saxophone player. He played in my band. Therefore, everybody will understand that. And that's why Eric's album is going to sell. When Times Squared came out, and my brother's Alan, he's running the record. He's the head of Paisley Park Records.
Yep.
And Prince is saying to us, well, I just assumed that Eric's album will sell between 300,000 and 400,000 copies. And I'm looking at my brother and we're looking, I said, do you want to be the one to tell him? Weather Report, the greatest, progressive instrumental band of its time, had one gold record.
Yep.
A typical Weather Report album maybe sold 100,000, and that's Weather Report.
Was that Heavy Weather that sold gold? I think that was. Yeah,
that was the only one.
That has
Birdland.
Yeah, Birdland,
Birdland
would be the more famous. Yeah.
Weather Report almost got dropped by Columbia after the second album.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm just thinking, well, this is probably the only album I'm going to do for Paisley Park Records because, this album isn't going to sell that. It's just not. Times Squared was relatively successful considering the market, but it wasn't anything like that.
Yeah.
So here it comes time for me to find out from Prince. While Alan is running a record company, it's up to Prince whether he's going to pick up the option on my contract to enable me to do an additional album. So that decision has to be made within the specific time period as determined by the contract. Yeah. So it was time for me to sit and talk to Prince and say, okay, what's up? Am I going to do a second album or what?
Yeah.
So we had a very interesting conversation. It was very funny. But the upshot of it was I had no illusions or expectations that I was going to even have the opportunity to just do a second album. And Prince was way ahead of me.
What's your brother's name?
Alan.
And he
was at that time, he was Prince's tour manager starting in 1983. But when Paisley Park Records actually came into existence as a working label, Alan was named to be the head of it. And he did that until spring of 1992 when Alan left and went elsewhere.
Because we were at Paisley, when was this? I don't even know. I don't remember. Like 6 days ago? The 7th. And I talked to some security guy. His last name's Adams or something. He's having like I don't even know, like a sit down thing, with his album. I forgot what it's called. I'm blanking out.
A Q&A kind of thing.
No, it's like he's presenting his album, like to certain people, like playing it, kind of like what Marty had, with their son. Listening party. There we go.
Listening party, yeah.
He was saying that they're gonna open up the studio after December. So I was thinking maybe your brother would be involved, but I guess
Not
He
at all.
hasn't been involved.
Not at all.
not.
Nope.
Yeah. So
No.
Hmm.
Anyway, I had this conversation with Prince, and basically Prince was basically saying, well, what do you want to do? And I said, Prince, you know, I had a working band at the time, but I said, I need to start with that, but I got a ton of material. And I said, Paisley Park Records, while being an independent label, was associated with Warner Brothers because it was a partner label between Prince and Warner Brothers. So all the marketing and all the distribution is handled through Warner Brothers. I wasn't signed to Warner Brothers; I was signed to Paisley Park. But yet, everything that happens with my CDs on Paisley are up to basically what Warner's is going to do with them. And Warner's had just reformed their jazz A&R department. They had some new people in. So I told Prince, I said, Alan and I really feel it's important for me to sit down with the A&R department at Warner Brothers, because they can provide me with the resources and the introduction to musicians, and provide for me an environment so I can make the music I want to make the way I want to make it. And Prince laughed. He says, you want to go get involved with the suits at the record company? And I said, Prince, let me ask you something. I don't know if I, asked it directly like this, but it was basically, do you have my back? And I said, if you have my back, then I can take advantage and use all the resources at Warner Brothers. But in the final analysis, I can still make the final decision, because the only person that can overrule me is you. And if you have my back, then I'm good to go. And Prince basically looked at me and said, Eric, do you know why I want you to make an album? Now, excuse me, this is going to sound as self-serving as anything I could say, but never stopped me before. So Prince looks at me and said, Eric, I don't have a clue as to what you're going to do, but you need to get the hell out of here and go do it. And I don't want you to feel that you have to do it here. You're cut loose. Go wherever. Go to Warner Brothers, go wherever. And when your album is done, just give it to me, because I think I'm going to dig it. Now, there is no, anybody who wants to talk about Prince like a dog, I can talk about Prince like a dog. The guy was messed up. The guy had issues. And there's going to be a documentary that's going to come out soon on Prince that I have a feeling a lot of Prince fans are not going to like, because it is going to go into aspects of Prince that most of the Prince fanatics don't want to hear about.
Yeah.
But the point is that for me, all that other shit is Tweedledum Tweedledee. Prince pointed his finger at me once and said something that was blatantly anti-Semitic. I don't believe Prince is an anti-Semite. I just thought that he was being stupid in the situation in which he was having this conversation with me. But I knew Prince. But somebody else is, well, that is he an anti-Semite? No, he's just a spoiled brat who wants what he wants when he wants it. And he will say anything that he thinks can get under the skin of the person that he's talking to. Sounds a lot like Donald Trump in that regard.
Yep.
There's a lot of that. But all of that's Tweedledum Tweedledee, because this is the cat that came to me when no one else was knocking on my door, banging on my door, telling me, hey, Eric, come make an album for us. This is the guy that said to me, Eric, you need to go make your music, and I'm going to give you the money to do it. Get the hell out of here. I don't want to hear from you until this album is done. And that's basically what it is. And there's first of all, to have that kind of a compliment from a musician of his caliber is one thing. But here's a guy that actually had a record company can make it happen. Yeah. That's the most important, that at the end of the day, that's what Prince means to me.
But at that time, Eric, you had artists on the Warner Brothers jazz label, like David Sanborn, I believe, was on there. Miles had just
Miles had just come over.
Miles had just come over with Tutu.
Joshua Redman's first album came out at the same time.
At the same time, right?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to then go to Warner Brothers and find a producer, Gil Goldstein, who we agreed on. And they're the ones that could introduce me and say, I know Weather Report means a lot to you. Who would you love to have on your rhythm section? And Gil Goldstein says to me, well, I'll call Alphonso Johnson and Alex Acuna. This is one of Weather Report's rhythm sections. And I'm sitting there, you can get those cats to play on my album. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. And let's go. You know, I'm in New York. I did most of the album in New York.
You're like
So
Billy
that-
Joel at that moment, who gets
you
to
know,
hire the dream
Well,
saxophone.
the thing was, the thing was, for all the horn arrangements, I said, I want Eddie Palmieri's horn cat. I want the cats that are playing with Eddie Palmieri right now to play, the brass arrangements that I'm going to write for that stuff. So we're in New York, Gil Goldstein. I said, you know Brian Lynch, these cats? He said, yeah. So he introduces to me, and that's how I first met Eddie Palmieri. So it's like, meet
cool.
these cats, you meet that, everything works, everything,
Cool.
So, but Prince is the guy that gave me that opportunity.
To do it.
And
Fantastic.
that's, before anything else, if all it had ended up being is my being a part of Prince's band, that would have been fine. Like I say, hey man, I was a part of a band led by one of the most remarkable musicians in any genre of music you could imagine.
Yeah.
And that's enough. But after that, he's then saying to me, well, you're not in my band anymore. It doesn't matter. You need to go make your own music. And I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
Amen.
And I there is nothing in my career that I can, singularly be more grateful, than that. And the fact that I was able to do that and have the resources to do it, because the thing was, if any other label had signed me, first of all, the recording budget I got would have probably been about a tenth of what he was giving
Pittance.
me. Yeah.
Especially
but the
when
thing
you
was,
had to make your records on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you did Now and Again, you weren't getting that kind of money for when you made Now and Again.
No. And I should point out, Now and Again was produced, the executive producer for that was Bobby Rifkin. Bobby C. He came to me years later and said, Eric, you need to make a record and I'm going to help you do it. Now,
That's
obviously,
awesome.
it was a much lower budget, but it was enough for me to make the record that I was able to do. So,
and by that time, technology had really advanced so that you were able to do it on a much smaller budget, but the quality of it,
Yes. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
interesting that he says that, though, that he's going to, that he was like, you're going to go do this. I'm going to help you do this. I'm going to pay for this, because who was, but I mean, who was Prince's, this is how much I really don't know about Prince, just being honest, but who was Prince dating? Apollonia? Is that what her name was?
Not then.
At that time?
Long after
No,
that.
but like long time ago.
Dated Apollonia.
Who
Apollonia was one.
Yeah.
Susanna Melvoin, of course,
Well, there was an interview on her or something, or Vlad, whatever, was interviewing her. Yeah, Vlad TV. And she was saying that he wanted to do, a movie, Purple Rain, whatever, and no one would approve it. No one would approve it. No one would want to pay for it. And she said some millionaire guy had a whole bunch of money and lent it to him. So I think he's kind of like, hey, someone did it for me. I'm going to do it for you because I see that you have it, kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to be absolutely honest, it was at that period of time. 6 months later, who knows? Prince was, what Prince was interested, but at that point in time, all I know is I'm sitting in with him, having, discussing it. And he basically, and I said, Prince, I just need to know whether you're going to pick up the option so I can do another album. And he just said, oh, hell yeah, man. That's no question. It's just like, what do you want to do? And I just said, this is where I'm going to start. He said, all right, have at it. But I told him, I said, if you've got my back, then I can take advantage of all the resources and all the benefits of the relationship that I can hopefully form with everybody at Warner Brothers and with the producer. And that's what happened. And the thing is, there was no strings attached.
Is music therapy to you?
Sometimes. Not always.
Yeah.
Not always. Some days it's just the job we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. but you know, at that point, I said, you know, I was in an absolutely wonderful circumstance that, and so I always have to be thankful. You know, Prince didn't have a note to do with any of the music on that album, but none of it would have been made without his basically saying, "Man, go. You have no creative obligation other than to do what you want to do."
And you're one of the few that got to
Yeah.
do that. Now, did you tour off either album? I know you made TV appearances, you made a video. Did
Yeah.
you do any touring?
I wouldn't even say it's touring. It was just a run full of gigs. I put a band together. We did several gigs after Times Square came out.
Yeah.
And then we did several gigs after Things Left Unsaid came out. The unfortunate reality is that the economics of it, we were, the irony is that the only people that we were ever really able to reach were those people who were the Prince crowd, the Prince fans who knew who I was. We were never able to expand it beyond into the general market that exists for the kind of music that I make. And that's as much circumstance as anything else. I can't point to anyone, I can't really even point to the record company and say, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Although by the time Things Left Unsaid came out, the relationship by then between Prince and Warner Brothers had started to deteriorate rapidly.
Yeah.
So there was a part of the politics of it getting caught into that. But I can't sit here and say, well, if somebody had done this, the album would have been more successful than it was. I can't say that. All I know is that I have an album that I'm exceedingly proud of, and that represented pretty much not only what I was capable of doing, but more, because it was a learning process for me, the musician that I was going into the project, I was a better musician coming out of the other end of it. And more than anything, that's what is interesting to me.
And that's
Just
the
like
end game.
working with
If
Paul
you're
Peterson.
in this as a professional, that's the aspiration and hope that
Yeah.
you come out
And
a
the
better musician than you came out.
and what I'm able to do within the context of working with somebody like Paul that I wouldn't do on my own is what makes it so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
And more interesting, because just by the nature of the musician that Paul is, he's going to automatically put me in a situation where I have to think differently than if I was just doing it on my own. And I'm a firm believer that while I've made good music on my own, it's much more enjoyable and ultimately much more rewarding to be able to do it with people that can, just by the nature of the dialogue that you have with them, necessitates that you speak in a different way than you're just speaking to yourself. So.
All right, I'm gonna leave a final question, unless anybody else has any other questions. Chris, do you want to chime in on anything?
Yeah, the baseball thing. The Twins are playing right now, Game 3 of the ALDS. And
I know that.
I wanted to get Eric's thoughts on that.
Well, I hope the Twins win because, you know, it's a hometown team. We already explained earlier on, I'm a diehard Dodger fan. And unfortunately, the Dodgers are not doing well. So I don't have too much high hopes for them at the moment.
Right.
The Twins would be fine. I also dig Atlanta. I was really glad Atlanta won last night because Atlanta is such a great team. And one of my dearest, closest friends in all the world is a diehard Atlanta fan. So I root for the team because I root for my friend, you know.
Sure.
If the Dodgers don't win it, I hope Atlanta moves on. So, you know, we'll see. But yeah, so I can give you about 5 minutes because I got to go turn on the ball game here.
Yep.
Oh no, that's fine. You've given more than your lion's share.
Okay, so one last question, then I'll shut it down.
No, that's fine. If anybody else, I was going to say, what do you have coming up? Anything on the horizon that we can?
Nothing really.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, Paul and I want to get back and make some music together.
We want you to too.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, you know, once the last out of the last World Series game is done, then I'll probably sit and say, okay, Now I've got 4 months to do something else rather than watch baseball. So maybe then I'll get with Paul and maybe we'll get busy. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate you coming back on. When you do have a project coming up, I hope you'll come back and we can talk about that. I'd love to.
Absolutely.
And have maybe both you and Paul on if that's even feasible, because I know his
Sure.
schedule and your schedule can, you know,
No, that would be fun. Yeah.
that would be fun. And Eddie
Yeah.
Palmieri too. I would love to. We'll talk
I'll,
later
look,
about
I'll
that.
ask my brother to, just put in a feeler to him and see, see what.
See how he's doing
Sure.
first and foremost.
Yeah, well, yeah,
we hope he's
absolutely.
doing well.
Camille, nice to have met you and spoken with you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, man. Chris, the same with you. Good to see you.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure, man. All mine.
All right,
You
on
take
behalf
care.
of us all,
Yeah, we'll
thank you
talk
very
whenever.
much for joining the
Bye.
podcast
Okay,
on
man.
this.
Oh, sorry
excellent- these
for
are
the
gonna be 2
interruption in the
episodes.
middle. Yeah, sorry for the interruption in the middle. I don't know what I got to see if my other internet provider is back up and running.
No, not a problem. We'll just make one part 2 and part 3. I've got a trilogy now.
There you go.
There you
Cool.
go. Thanks again, Eric.
All right, man.